a drag performance, a drag brunch is a place for everyone to go. Like, kind of like you said earlier, like a lot of straight people do go as well. It's a very inclusive space. It's like you can be straight and come, you can be gay and come. You could not know how you identify, still come anyways. Like, we're not here to discriminate in any way. We're here to have a good time. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sex Positivity Unfiltered, where we talk about sex and we are not polite about it. My name is Lyndsey Murray.
And I'm Denise Stratton.
And in today's episode, we are talking about drag. And more specifically, what we're hoping to answer is, what is drag? What is the history of drag? And as well as some information about the controversies around drag story time. By the way, a reason why we're doing this episode is because we have hit our 1 year mark as a podcast. So we hit that at the end of July. And something we did to celebrate was we did go to drag brunch at Hamburger Mary's in Dallas. And we had a blast, first of all.
Yes.
We've been to drag brunch before, but we had a ton of fun and it was a way to celebrate, and it really inspired us to do this episode to talk about it.
Yeah, it's been a full year. I'm excited. It's been great.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And the kind of that first question to kick us off, what is drag? I really want to hear your definition. I know what drag is. I think maybe a lot of people do, but it was nice to look up an official definition of what it is.
Yeah, for sure. Whenever I did type it in the Google, it popped out that drag is a performance art that involves people dressing up and performing in exaggerated forms of gender expression, often for entertainment. Drag performances can include cross-dressing, makeup, and other tools to transform one's sex. Drag queens typically perform in historically feminine clothing and mannerisms, while drag kings typically perform in historically masculine clothing and mannerisms. Drag performances can take place in a variety of settings, such as clubs, theaters, cross-dressing balls, and then they often include comedy, social satire, and political commentary. So yeah, that's pretty much the general explanation of what is drag.
Yeah, and I think like a really important part is like the exaggeration of it all. Like I think RuPaul has a quote where she says, "I'm not trying to dress like a woman, I'm trying to dress like a drag queen."
Hey, I like that,
so it just gives some insight into the performance of it all and the exaggeration. Have you ever seen a drag king?
Oh,
Before?
of course.
I don't know if I have. I think I've mainly been around drag queens.
We will get into it thoroughly. However, drag kings, I want to say I saw drag kings around the same age that I saw drag queens. To me, from my experience, they were very much intertwined. That's not most people's experiences. Most people go to a drag queen show.
Yeah.
They see that. Very few. It's very rare that you'll see an all-female drag king cast. And I've only seen one show that does it. We have it here in Dallas. It's called Mustache Envy. And I've been a fanatic goer of their work for a while now. But yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I can't wait to hear about that because I haven't seen a show like that.
Yeah, actually, seeing Mustache Envy perform when I was a younger baby dyke, I really helped make me comfortable with being able to dress masculine. Like it helped me out a lot. Yeah, I love Mustache Envy. Actually, when I see some of those, I know they're real people, but when I see some of those performers that used to perform in the original show that I used to go to when I was about 10 years ago, I'm starstruck now.
Very cool. Very cool. Awesome.
When your research, did you get to go through the history of how drag began?
I did, yes. Okay. And I'll tell you what I found. And just for our listeners out there, we do like the research we do. I'm always open to the fact that there could be like information missing because I have the history that I saw, but I wouldn't be surprised like if we ever heard feedback like actually it started earlier or it was this or whatever. I'm totally open to that. But what I saw was it really starting in the Shakespearean theater, like in the late 16th, early 17th century, because back then, I think only men were allowed to participate in acting in the plays. And so if there were female parts in the play, men would have to play the female part. And then I also read that the word drag comes from like the dresses that men would wear to play the female parts would drag along the floor at the theater.
Oh,
And so
they're
it's called
drags.
drag because of
Yeah.
that. Yeah. That was
Okay.
like the history that I saw starting way back at the 16th century.
Okay, cool. And I apologize, guys. Me and Lyndsey have gone through a break for a little bit, celebrating our 1 year anniversary. I believe it's been like a month off since we recorded.
Yeah.
So she's given me a month to research. I did see everywhere on it says Shakespearean times. However, I just do want to point out that since the times of like ancient Greece, we had men dressing up as women, because back in the theater, women, it was very much a patriarchy. Women weren't allowed to perform. Greeks actually believed that allowing women to perform publicly would be dangerous, so men wore masks to play female characters, which allowed them to quickly transition between roles. And I even saw it in like the Roman times too. So we're talking about thousands and thousands of years ago that men played women roles all the time. It was never an issue. It's never been an issue.
And they had a good time doing it.
Yeah.
That was part of what I read too. Is like they had to do it, but they liked doing it.
It's theater, right? It's where you get to play, dress up, just in general.
Yeah, exactly.
But okay, so yeah, fast forward to Shakespearean time when the official term drag was implemented. So I found 3 stories. So I found the one you say where they would refer to wearing women's clothing as putting on their drags because their long petticoats would drag on the floor. So I definitely saw that one. I also saw that drag was an acronym that stood for dressed resembling a girl.
Huh, okay.
Yeah. So I saw that as well, which I've never heard of before. That was something I learned. And actually in American culture, the term drag, like the actual term drag, was coined from the grand rag balls. That was an early term for a masquerade ball that William Dorsey Swan is known for throwing. Do you know who William Dorsey Swan?
I don't.
All right. So this was someone that I learned in this research that now I'm extremely grateful for. So in the 1880s, fast forward from Shakespearean culture, drag was introduced into the United States by performers such as William Dorsey Swan, who coins himself as being the first queen of drag. So Swan, who was previously enslaved in Maryland, is also credited with secretly throwing some of the first drag balls called grand rag balls in Washington, D.C., where he would wear these extravagant gowns with long trains that would drag on the floor and perform dances to his audience of formerly enslaved men. So yeah, so these were like secret, illegal, underground balls that would happen. And he actually is self-proclaimed as the queen of drag.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah. When he identified for the first time as the queen of drag, because again, grand rag balls, that was the first time that the term drag was introduced.
Yeah.
So that we actually, in the queer culture, we attribute to him as creating that term. Or at least that's what I saw a bunch of the TikToks where it was the drags on the floor in Shakespearean times, but he was the first one to actually say, "Hey, drag queen."
He coined the term.
Yes. Yeah.
It's so cool to doing this research is so cool because there are so many stories out there. Like when you're trying to find where did a term originate from, it really depends on who you ask.
Yeah. Yeah. And it also points out that there is a lot of Black queer history that has been erased.
Yeah.
So these are things that don't get taught to you in school. These are things that we rarely will even discuss. Just like the Stonewall riots, just like drag kings in general. When you talk about Gladys Knight, like a lot of the queer culture is very much intertwined with Black history. Yeah. But yeah, so his attendees, a little bit more about Mr. Dorsey. His attendees would also dress in silk gowns and dance in these illegal events. And one of his dances was called the cakewalk. So this was said to mimic the walk of the mannerisms of a slave master.
Oh,
right?
wow.
Because they were all formerly enslaved. And fun facts, those movements are said to have similar movements and expressions to today's voguing.
Oh, okay, yeah. Because I read somewhere, speaking of Vogue, there was a drag ball documentary in the 90s that was called Paris is Burning, and that inspired Madonna's Vogue.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was the fact that I wanted to say. So that's very interesting that it's like voguing. Yeah.
The cakewalk, right? And then just a little bit of the tragedy of the history. Swan's balls, obviously, they were illegal. They got raided by DC police frequently. They even led to jail time. And with those controversies, those consequences, he started petitions and even bid for a presidential pardon, making Swan the first documented American activist to take legal steps to defend the queer community.
Oh, wow.
So William
Okay.
Dorsey Swan is a very important
Mhm.
person in the queer history. Yeah, so it was
Okay.
just, I had to mention him out there. And then because I'm going into drag queen, or because I'm going into the first drag queen, I did need to mention the first drag king. So you said you've never seen a drag king show. Have you ever seen one advertised? No, you've never. We don't see them in the
No.
media. We don't see. Yeah, I know. Unfortunately, and it drives me insane that this is the way it is. Even in the queer culture, it is very misogynistic. Yeah, like it's very much a, even in the drag culture, it's very much a patriarchal society, right? So where
Mhm.
men get more of the acts, they get bigger audiences, they get more of the lineups. I could be wrong. I haven't seen RuPaul's Drag Race in a really long time, but I've never seen a drag king performer
I haven't
perform. Yeah.
either. To my knowledge, it's drag queens.
Yeah, and it's a
Mhm.
drag race. And that goes across the line for a lot of gay bars too. You won't see, if you go to a drag queen show, it is very rare that you'll see a drag king perform. Maybe they'll sprinkle one in there,
Mhm.
maybe.
Yeah.
But that's even rare. Like I said, the first and only time I'd ever seen it was in Dallas when the Kings got together and they made their own show.
Yeah.
It's crazy that even in our society, even when like the topic is impersonating the opposite sex, like even in that lineup, it's still very much male ran.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like we talked about before, even in the queer community as a whole, there's biphobia and transphobia in the queer community. It's very similar to this, where there's still patriarchal issues and like gender biases, and it's still there,
I know.
unfortunately.
It's crazy.
Mhm.
So with that being said, I wanted to give a little bit of history to the first drag king that I could find in my research as well. Her name was Annie Hindle. She is coined as being the first king. She was the first popular male impersonator performer in the United States. She was born in 1840s in England. And she and her adopted mother, Anne Hindle, migrated to New York City in 1868. She married a guy named Charles Vivian. He was a ballad singer and founder of a theatrical fraternity. She married him in 1868, but separated with no legal divorce 6 months later. Right. So it was a very short marriage. And the reason she left him is she stated that Vivian had abused her during their relationship. One of the things that I found really funny is she started performing as a male impersonator in the same year that she got married to this guy, and as Charles. Like, she started performing as Charles in 1868, and she performed all the way to 1886. And the thing about her act is she received high reviews and she had steady bookings. So it was an
This was a
act that was,
success,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. A review of one of her performances at the Adelphi Theater in Galveston, Texas. Hey, Texas. Quote, Annie Hindle was proved a great success. As a male impersonator, her sex is so concealed that one is apt to imagine that it is a man who is singing. So, I mean,
Wow, so she, like,
yeah.
really embodied the role.
Yes, and that's in Texas. This
Huh?
is where we are not very,
And at that time period, too.
in the 1800s.
Yeah.
Wow. All right, Annie or Charles. But
It's a
so,
big deal for her to even leave her husband
oh,
at that time period.
there's no legal divorce. So I'm wondering if anyone even knew. But yeah, I guess we
Yeah.
wouldn't ever know. And
Yeah.
speaking of marriage, another fun fact about good old Annie. In 1886 in Grand Rapids, Michigan, Hindle married her dresser, Annie Ryan, while on a tour through the Midwest. Hindle dressed in male clothing and gave her name as Charles to a local Baptist minister who performed the ceremony.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
That's
So
cool.
technically, we had our first gay marriage, guys. She just impersonated a guy named Charles.
And it worked.
But yeah, I thought that was hilarious. And then on top of that, so this was this was her first marriage that I saw in the research. But after doing a little bit more research, it appears that Hindle's marriage to Ryan was not the first time that she wed a woman. According to the research that I could find, she had 3 other marriages, 2 women that she did acts with prior to this.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And she would just dress up as Charles and go to the ceremony, and I guess the priest or the minister had no idea.
Okay. Shit, good for her though.
Good for her. Yeah. So that's a little bit of our the first drags that I could find in the history, which I thought was really important to tell and share with you guys. Unfortunately, any kind of cross-dressing was criminalized by the 1920s here in America, which included drag, but drag was still very known and accepted in the vaudeville culture. So many performers had to perform underground. Do you know what vaudeville is in general? Yeah, you weren't like a child of the theater, right?
No.
Yeah, me neither. Vaudeville was like the old school theater, like when motion pictures first started coming on. So think of Charlie Chaplin.
Okay.
This was when the acting scene became a big deal, right? And there was a little bit more of a comedic thing. But around the vaudeville time also came the Harlem Renaissance. Again, Black culture is very much intertwined into the drag scene, and a lot of culture came from this era. And that's where one of the most popular drag kings in history is Gladys. You always see her in like this beautiful white tuxedo with white top hat, and she did these acts where like she would like growl at women and try to seduce them. It seemed like a really fun theatrical scene.
Well, and that's what drag really is all about. It's a performance, but it's about expression, it's about joy, it's about being true to who you are. Like, it's very representative of kind of everything we talk about on this podcast, like being genuine to who you are and being honest about that and being open about that. And like being open to explore as well.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of expression and exploration within it. And speaking of, something I did look up was like, what's the difference between cross-dressing and drag?
Oh, good. Okay.
Because like, how do you categorize that? And how, like, my interpretation, and I think there's many interpretations, but I view cross-dressing as like the big umbrella, and then drag is like a category under that umbrella.
Okay.
Because I think drag is really a performance. Like,
yes.
Someone can cross-dress, but maybe that's just how they prefer to dress on a daily basis, let's say. But drag is really like a performance. Like I think a lot of drag performers would say that they are their drag persona when they are performing, but if they were going to go get dinner on a random night with friends, they wouldn't show up in drag because they're not performing. I just thought I would throw that in there. Of cross-dressing is a part of it, but it's like the performance piece that really makes it drag.
What's the definition of cross-dressing?
If you just Google real quick, the definition, it just says cross-dressing is the act of wearing clothes traditionally or stereotypically associated with a different gender.
Oh, how funny. All right, guys. Denise is a cross-dresser, obviously. It's good
and
to know.
usually like no one really sees it as cross-dressing typically unless it's the other way around. If it's a man wearing women's clothes, then we would be like, oh, they're a cross-dresser. But when it's the other way, I don't ever think I've really viewed it as cross-dressing.
Me neither, honestly.
Right? Yeah, now that we're talking about it, but that is technically the definition.
Yeah. Women wear men's clothes all the time without thinking of it as cross-dressing in general. Like, let's talk about uniforms. Like, whenever we have to perform some type of outdoor work, I put on my jeans and my long button-ups and things, and it's more of work clothes, but it could very much be seen as like manly clothing. That's good realization today. Yeah, nowadays it's crazy. It's crazy to think of the pivot that we've given, because cross-dressing, drag, these are things that have been all throughout our culture, and it's never been a problem, right? It's never been an issue when someone puts on clothing of the opposite gender and does a performance. Never an issue. Even nowadays, we can go back 50 years. It wasn't an issue. That some of my favorite movies, Mrs. Doubtfire.
That's the one I always think of. Yes.
Love me some Robin Williams. Yeah. But yeah, Hairspray with John Travolta. I can go Martin Lawrence, Big Mama's House, one of my favorite movies. Wayne's Brothers with the white chicks. Eddie Murphy when he was dressing up as the Clumps. Like, actors or at least in theater, it has always been
Well,
an acceptable thing.
yeah, and I think about Wesley Snipes and Tu Wong Fu,
Oh,
you
yeah,
know?
okay,
Yeah. So
yeah,
there's
yeah.
plenty of media examples where cross-dressing has been okay, it's for the purpose of entertaining. But
It's
then
comedic.
when it comes to drag, it's like we have an issue with drag and I'm like, but technically we've seen drag in the media for a long time and no one really has an issue with it unless it's like a live show.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting
Or
how that
a
comes up?
live show in a queer
Yeah,
space.
that's it. That's exactly it, in a queer space.
Yeah.
Right? If it was like, oh, everyone who is performing is straight, but they're just dressed as whatever, and like a lot of straight people go, then it's entertaining and fun. But when
Yeah.
it's in a queer space, now it's overly sexualized, problematic. It's very weird how people can't see the connection of what exactly is the issue you have with it. It's because it's queer people
Yeah.
doing it.
Yeah. Which I want to appeal to young Lyndsey, because I do know that you came from a background where there wasn't a lot of queer people around
Mhm.
you. And it was something that like you started seeing more of as you got older and you started
Mhm.
coming to the city and
Yeah.
things like that. So how old are you and you attended your first drag performance?
I was probably like early to mid 20s, probably the first time
Okay.
I attended one. Going to college really was a life changer. It
Hey.
was because when I grew up in this very small conservative town, and like the idea of queer people did make me uncomfortable for a while
Okay.
because I just, when you grow up in such a religious conservative environment, anything else just seems so weird, uncomfortable, hard to believe. Am I really okay with that? And then when you go to college, I moved like a few hours away for school. You're exposed to people from all over the world, right? And so when you go to if you go to college, like you have people challenging you every day, whether you know it or not. You have people that are in queer relationships. All of a sudden, there's a lot of Black people at your school, which I wasn't used to. There's just all this exposure that I think is really necessary
Good. Yeah,
for
diversity
you to
is.
go. There's a lot I need to learn here. And
Hey.
so over time, yeah, I would say like late to mid 20s.
Okay, someone dragged you too. Like they were like, "Hey, come with me," or
Yeah. And I can't remember, like, unfortunately, that was like 10 years ago. I can't remember the exact context, but I don't remember being uncomfortable. I remember being excited.
Oh,
It was
good.
like,
Okay.
I didn't know that this was a thing and it's going to be really fun. And it was really fun. Because I think in college you meet a bunch of queer people, but I'm pretty sure some of the people I went with were straight too.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't know, I think extra cool because they were like, they're comfortable with it, so why should I not be comfortable with it? You know what I mean? So, yeah.
So
that's what I
you wouldn't
recalled.
consider it like overly sexualized? You wouldn't consider, or was it? Okay, because nowadays I do want to point out there are a lot of straight people that go to the drag shows.
Yeah.
There's, to be honest, I want to say it's like a 50-50 mix. It's an insane amount of
Mhm.
just heterosexual and queer people just all coming in to watch these performers. Nowadays, drag performances are a sinking act, right?
Mhm.
They pick out their favorite songs,
And the
maybe something
music is always
meaningful.
so good. They know what they're doing. Like they pick very classic songs. It could be like new pop songs. It could like songs that they know people will know the words to. People want to
Yes.
dance to. It's great.
It's
Oh my
really
gosh.
fun, yeah. And for anyone who hasn't attended one before, just a couple tips that you can go when you go. Definitely take a little bit of cash to tip your
Mhm.
performers. I think, unfortunately, that might be one of the reasons that it gets attributed to being like a cabaret, which drives me insane. That
Because it's
people,
not cabaret
no,
at all. It's not
no,
even close to that.
no.
So yeah, there's no nudity. You're
No.
not seeing like any inappropriate body parts. They dress sexy, but you could see anyone dress sexy. You could go to a coffee shop and see someone dress sexy.
Yeah, I want to point out that don't get me wrong, there are drag performances that can be sexualized. There are
Yeah.
drag performances that can be very raunchy. A lot of times these performances are done in the setting of an adult's bar, like a
Yes.
bar.
Yeah.
Right?
You have to be old enough to drink to go.
Exactly. It's usually performed at 11 o'clock at night. It's very much an adult setting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like, even if it can be like a raunchy performance or maybe it is sexualized, I've never felt uncomfortable with it because no one is wanting to like get too close to you. No one is like touching you. They're not wanting you to touch them. It's like part of the dancing to the music. Like,
Mhm.
honestly, the way I can think of it is like if you go to a concert, think about like you go to a Taylor Swift concert.
Yeah.
She has some very sexy performances in her show. Again, she's not like showing her boobs or anything like that, which you're not going to see that at like a drag show either. But she has some very like sexy, provocative performances that go with her music. And kids go to those concerts,
Yeah.
right? So, like, when someone is, oh, it's overly sexualized, to me, I don't see much difference in a drag performing to a song than
Taylor Swift
going to
concert.
a Taylor Swift. Really, that's the comparison I think of. And some concerts are even more sexy. I think of Meg the Stallion.
Oh,
If you go and see
yeah.
her, you're going to see her ass.
Yeah.
But anyone can go to those concerts. So it's just, you just know it can be sexy. But do I think it's inappropriate? I don't think a drag performance is inappropriate. And you're right. It's the ones I've been to, I think have always been at a bar.
Yeah.
It's adults only that go.
Exactly. And right now, we are going through a time where there's a lot of anti-drag legislation. And I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that drag has become mainstream, which
Yeah.
is awesome in my opinion. Like the fact that RuPaul created the show RuPaul's Drag Race has pretty much brought it to televisions everywhere.
Yes,
right?
it has everywhere now, and I love it. It's legendary.
Seen RuPaul's Drag Race?
Mhm.
I like at least
It's
to
so
season 3 or 4.
fun.
I was
Yeah.
dedicated. But yeah, because we brought it so mainstream and now a lot of people watch it, I feel like people saw that and thought of it as an abomination and were like, okay, we got to do something to stop this,
Yeah.
which drives me insane. So just to pull out some of the anti-drag legislation that we've seen, or just to define what we have, anti-drag laws are rules that have been introduced in different states and countries to limit drag performances. The laws are part of a larger push by some politicians to control public shows that they think aren't suitable for kids or don't meet certain standards of decency. That's word right there. Often drag shows are labeled as adult cabaret or sexually explicit performances, which puts them under the same rules as adult entertainment. And it drives me insane that they get categorized as adult cabaret, because to me, the only similarities that you have to an adult cabaret show, and I worked at one, I bartended for an adult cabaret for 6 months, so I know what they look like, is the fact that they get cash tips. And I guess that they perform to music. So those are the only two things.
Only two things. Yeah. There's no other similarity.
Yeah, whatsoever. There's a different reason why you go into a cabaret show versus why you would attend a drag show.
Because a drag show, you're not going to get turned on. You're not going to see any body parts. You literally are going to see performers who are lip syncing to really amazing music, but also like at a drag brunch, they're also really funny. It's almost, it's like a comedy show. Like they're very funny. They're very witty. They interact with the crowd in a very like funny comedic way. And so you're just going for entertainment. Like I've been to several drag brunches or drag performances. I've never once gone with at all the same expectation as if I was going to a cabaret show, because they're totally different performances. Lumping them in with adult entertainment seems very weird to me, because adult entertainment to me means like nudity. Yeah. And there's no nudity at a drag show.
No, I feel like it's the religious sector's way of lumping them in together, because in their minds, and again, I don't mean to speak for the religious sector, but this is just my interpretation. In their minds, it's all an abomination, so it all needs to be put
lumped
together.
Which
is not correct and shouldn't be going into law either. So just to give a little info out there, so we have a bill proposed in Texas that speaks to home, where Texas seeks to ban drag performances in public and private venues if minors are present. The language of these bills is often broad, leading to concerns about overreach and enforcement based on subjective standards. So some Texas cities have already begun enforcing law ordinances that restrict drag shows, reflecting a broader state and local push against such performances. And then states like Tennessee and Florida also have similar laws too. So we've seen these in the past, I want to say probably like 4 or 5 years that we've seen these legislations pop up.
And the vague language drives me crazy. And there's also, I'm not going to get this 100%. I don't know the name of this law, okay? But there was a law that the Supreme Court overruled, because like when something goes into legislation, usually it's hard to get the language so tight that you know exactly what it means. There's usually a level of interpretation. And usually in this example, or even if it's environmental laws or whatever, there's experts in different fields who can give like the most accurate interpretation. And that's what lawmakers really have to go off of, right? Or like people who can enforce it, that's what they have to go off of. That used to be like a requirement, but the Supreme Court overruled that. So now like a judge could make their own interpretation, and that's going to be the ruling when the language is really vague. So the more vague the language, really the more terrifying it is, because someone who's a judge who really doesn't know anything about this world could read it and be like, this means that there's a total ban now, and that's how it's going to be. And you miss really expert opinion on what the interpretation is. So that happened like earlier this year, maybe late last year. I can't remember exactly.
It feels like it just happened, but I
Yeah.
want to say it was a couple years ago where it
Yeah.
was first put into place, which is crazy because we are, in America at least, we are, the First Amendment of our Constitution is freedom of speech, right? And
Mhm.
expression and being able to just express yourself.
But only if it's within the confines of
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
that's what it really was. It's like, it is a freedom, but it's not always a freedom.
No, and that's it. To me, this anti-drag legislation very much violates that First Amendment right that we always have. A lot of people will argue that it's harmful to children. If you're bringing a child to an R-rated show at a bar, no matter what that show is, it's probably not good for them to be there, just in
Right.
general. We can all agree from any party that you decide to align with, that's just how it is. You don't bring a child to a show that it's meant for adults, right? But unfortunately, this legislation was attacking things like story hour, like drag story hour for children, where the only thing that these performers would do would dress up in drag, and then they would go read children stories.
And it really boils down to, it's because it's surrounded by queerness.
Yeah.
That's really the issue, because parents take their kids to R-rated movies all the time. We have a friend of ours who went and saw the Deadpool Wolverine movie, definitely rated R. Someone took their 6-year-old to go see that. So to me, the issue is not, oh, this is inappropriate for the kids. It's more like anything that looks queer, it should not be allowed, is really what I hear.
Yeah, Mrs. Doubtfire is a family film.
Yeah, it is. It is a family film that kids definitely watch.
Yeah.
So the controversies around like the story times with children is really infuriating, because a lot of people who do drag and like people who even attended these story times, there have been stories of them being like physically threatened.
Oh yeah, no, there have been armed protests outside of these events. These are, again, to me, it's more harmful to see these grown adults outside of a story time hour with protesting with hateful signs and hateful speech and spewing hateful things. To me, that's more harmful to children than having a drag queen tell them a story with a book.
Yeah. And I'll give some background on Drag Queen Story Hour. So that was first started in 2015. So it's been almost 10 years since this has been going on. But it was started in 2015 by an author and activist named Michelle T. in San Francisco. And the goal was to promote reading and diversity. So there was like a purpose behind this, right? It was like, let's get kids reading, listening to books, and we can promote diversity at the same time. And these events are usually geared for children aged 3 to 11 and are hosted by drag queens who read children's books and engage in other learning activities in public libraries. And as of 2019, Drag Queen Story Hour has 34 US and I think 5 international chapters. And they strive to capture the imagination and play of gender fluidity, of childhood kids, this like glamorous, positive, and queer role models. I think that is really important because, and I'll share this from like my therapist hat, but I have a lot of queer clients and I have like a lot of trans clients as well. And a common story you'll hear is that people who are queer in some way, this isn't true every time, but a lot of times they knew they were from a very young age. Like age like 4 or 5. And kids don't really have the language, so they may not know what it is, but they know there's something different about them.
Yep.
So I think people really have this fear that, oh, if we have a drag queen come in, it's going to convert my kids somehow. That's literally never how it works. There's not going to be a kid who's genuinely straight and grows up to be straight who is just going to magically be swayed. I don't know. Oh, I see the drag queen. Now I'm queer. That's not really how it works. It really works in the other way where kids who already know that they are feel very represented.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, there's someone who likes to wear dresses. Like, I like to wear dresses or whatever. Why would that ever be like a bad thing for a child? The representation matters a lot. It's the same when you see in like movies and TV and books, and even in the drag queen story time, they'll read books that have queer characters in it, and everyone is so worried that the exposure is going to magically make my kid gay. That's not how it works.
No.
If they know there's something different about them, they're just going to feel represented. And the data shows if you have quality representation and you get the chance to express who you really are, that's going to lead to you being more mentally healthy in the long run, right? So it's even coming from a mental health aspect. I see nothing wrong with it. I think there's very much this moral queer panic that comes with it. That's actually much more damaging than the story time itself.
Yeah, no, and I can attest to that just off my experience. I've mentioned it on the podcast before, but I knew I was gay from age 5. Like, very much. And I didn't have the correct language at all. I even remember telling my mom that I was kissing girls in school, and she told me, no, don't do that. But yeah, like, it was something that I felt in me. Like, I always saw myself in the role, the more masculine role, just from a very young age. I grew up in Texas. I grew up in a very Republican, conservative, religious household, and a very Hispanic household as well, where those words didn't exist. Knowing that someone was gay, I knew the term gay after I got a little bit older, but it was always in a negative connotation. Like, it was always something that was seen as this group of people who just are different from you, and you shouldn't hang out with them because you might catch it and things like that. I remember even my mother refused to say the word lesbian. She this is gonna sound very racist, and it actually is, but she would call them Lebanese because it was just easier for her to say that word.
Yeah.
And
it reminds me of a Golden Girls episode where Dorothy's friend is in town and she's a lesbian, but like none of the other roommates know. Like, only Dorothy and her mom know, and because they don't think because like this is in the 80s, so they're like, oh, the other girls can't really handle that information. Then the friend ends up having a crush on Rose, and so Dorothy and her mom are talking about it, and then Blanche comes in and she's like, what's going on? Like, what are you talking about? And Dorothy's, Jean is a lesbian. And Blanche goes, isn't Danny Thomas one? Because she thought she said Lebanese. Yeah, she's like, isn't Danny Thomas one? What's the big deal? And she was like, not Lebanese, Blanche, lesbian. And she was like, lesbian. Lesbian. It was like, yes, that's what that means.
Oh, come on now. I heard you laughing. What's so funny? For starters, Gina's a lesbian. What's funny about that? You aren't surprised? Of course not. I mean, I've never known any personally, but isn't Danny Thomas one?
Not Lebanese, Blanche. Lesbian.
Lesbian. Lesbian. Lesbian. But isn't that where one woman and another...
We already know what it means.
maybe that's where my mom got it from, guys.
She might have gotten
my
it
mom
from
loved
that
Golden
episode.
Girls. Okay, that makes sense.
She probably got that. It's a very hilarious, like, well done scene. But even just in the 80s, someone like not knowing what that word means seems really weird to me.
Yeah.
But again, if you're not exposed and you know nothing about any of that, I could see someone being like, what's that? Yeah. So your mom would call them Lebanese.
She would call, the Lebanon, because oh man, just the amount of anti-gay stuff that was in my household growing up from being a gay daughter.
Which is so hard when you already know that you're queer.
Oh, it would make me fight it. Like,
Yeah.
for the longest time, I did everything I could to just like suppress that portion of myself. I even remember when I really I really wanted to start dressing into boys' clothing early on. I want to say 7, 8 years old. I even asked my mom if I could cut my hair. But yeah, the only way that I could find the language at the time was by calling myself a tomboy. Because I knew tomboys were girls who like to be dressed a little bit more in the masculine era.
Yeah.
They like to play sports. They like to do things like this. And more of the jockiness. So that's the avenue that I really did try to go down, was being as big of a tomboy as I could, because I felt comfortable in that space.
Yeah.
But if I had a queer story hour, a drag story hour, if I had people that I could actually look up to around, I'm sure the trajectory would have been a little bit different.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would have saved me, because I went through a lot of hurt trying to come out and be okay with myself at first, and then finally explaining it to my loved ones. That was a rough time for me. So yeah, I do love the fact that we're attesting that it's not that the representation of queer folks or the exposure to queer people or queer culture is turning children gay. No, it's giving them the language to be able to self-identify themselves.
Because how cool would it have been if, while you were 5, 6, 7, 8, there was a kid's story time and there was a drag queen or a queer person reading the story, and there's also queer characters in the story that you're hearing. That would have probably made you feel like, wait, maybe this is okay.
Yeah.
That I feel this way.
Yeah.
Like, we're normalizing it.
If I would have seen a drag king when I was a younger girl, I'm sure that would have been a positive experience for me, or at least for me internally.
Absolutely.
Maybe not with me after I talked to my mother about it, but yeah, for me internally, for sure.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why this controversy around it, I think people who are really up in arms about it are very misinformed.
Yeah.
And I think what gets really difficult is that, I'm not saying this is true for everyone. I think some people are open to learning, but there's a lot of people who are not open to learning. Yeah. That's what makes it really hard, is that you could no, these are actually the facts. Here's how it's actually helpful. But people are really convinced of their narrative. Yeah. Right? And they're going to stick to that. And then it gets into law, and being in Texas is really hard.
Oh, yeah. And when we make it a law, we're talking about imprisoning or giving consequences to these acts that, to me, are sometimes harsher than actual violent acts.
Yeah.
So like violations of these laws can lead to severe penalties, including heavy fines, the revocation of a business license for venues, and even criminal charges for performers and organizers. In some states, repeat offenders could face felony charges. You can become a felon for merely dressing the way that makes you most comfortable for a performance. Yeah. To me, insane.
It is
insane.
It is, and it's scary for business owners.
Oh yeah.
So businesses who keep that door open, we're going to keep doing drag performances every week. It's very bold.
Yeah, I could lose my license. And
because I could also understand if a business doesn't want to take the risk. I get that perspective as well. Yeah, that whole thing is really unfortunate.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, apparently the mere sight of a person in fabulous makeup and high heels is a threat to public decency, especially if kids might see it. But
again, like I said earlier, I could walk into a coffee shop and there would be someone with heels and lipstick on and a short dress. Like,
when people equate the adult cabaret, I don't want to see a man in a thong and in tight dresses and heels. That's inappropriate for kids. And I'm like, so I guess you don't take your kids to the beach, because
you don't take them anywhere. Then they're that sheltered. Like, I'm not buying, because you go to the beach and see a man in a Speedo.
Exactly. Like, you see them in a Speedo, women in thongs with the cheeks out.
You see them in a Speedo at the Olympics.
Oh yeah. No, we can even go to something that is very popular in like conservative culture, which would be wrestling matches. They literally are wearing these tiny little Speedos that you see at Chippendales as well whenever you're looking at the cabaret performances there. But you see them in the same outfits, and that form of entertainment also has violence. So not only are they men in Speedos, but they're also whacking each other.
And I think it goes back to the queer aspect. Like, whether anyone is blatantly saying this or not, the violent, like using wrestling as an example, like the violence aspect of it is very like masculine, manly. Like, this is acceptable. Like, this is like straight entertainment because here's how men act. But if it's the exact same outfit at a cabaret show, that is too gay. And I don't want to expose my kid to that.
True.
I think it really boils, now that we're talking about it, I'm like, I think that's what it boils down to.
No, it has to, because even
Yeah.
in the WWE, WWF performances, those men wear makeup. Like, we
Yes,
literally...
they do, because they're performing.
Exactly,
They're
Lyndsey,
performing.
thank you.
Any live performance, you are going to wear makeup. Men in the theater, even if they're playing Don Dapper from Mad Men and it's a live performance, they are wearing makeup because they're on a stage and there's lights in their face. They have to.
Yeah. Craziness, guys. Again, it's not drag. It's not the actual dress up of drag that we are afraid of. It's more of the fact that it's queer culture that we are afraid of, which drives me insane. I wrote in my little anti-drag legislation that critics argue that the broad language used in these laws can be easily misinterpreted or misused to target not just drag performances, but any LGBTQ plus public expression, infringing, in my opinion, on free speech and artistic expression, which to me is very important. And these laws also disproportionately target the queer community, which is not supposed to be the point, but in my eyes is the point that they're making, or at least in my eyes, that's the way I see. And then these laws could, like you said, could make venues think twice about hosting any LGBTQ plus events, just in case they get fined or shut down. Which, I mean, that's exactly what we need, right? Less culture, less diverse voices, more just boring, same old. Like,
more Cracker Barrels. That's what we need.
Oh, it drives me insane. But okay, so in your therapist hat, why is drag needed?
I think drag is needed because it really goes back to the representation. That's honestly like the biggest reason why it's needed. Because it's not just the performance, but it's people who are representing, I'm out here being who I am, doing what I want, and I'm not harming anyone, and I'm having a good time. And I'm also allowing other people to have a good time. Drag, like a drag performance, a drag brunch, is a place for everyone to go. Like, kind of like you said earlier, like a lot of straight people do go as well. It's a very inclusive space. They do a better job at being inclusive than straight people do. They do. It's like you can be straight and come, you can be gay and come. You could not know how you identify, still come anyways. Like, we're not here to discriminate in any way. We're here to have a good time. And I get in for drag performance, like I get to dress up how I want to dress up. And like, why would that ever be a bad thing? So going back to like my therapist hat, a lot of people in this world who feel like they don't belong, these are spaces where they do belong, right? I've had several queer clients that don't feel like they have a support system, and maybe they don't have a support system. Like maybe their whole life they've grown up in this very like conservative, heavily religious space, but they know that they're not straight, but they can't tell anyone.
Yep.
I have some people where I'm the only person that knows that about them, which like on one hand, I'm very honored I get to share that space with them, but I don't want your therapist to be the only person that gets to know that about you.
Yeah.
I want everyone to be able to get to know that about you.
Yeah.
Because that is literally, it's just part of who you are. Like you can't separate it from who you are. You can't have, I'm queer and then the rest of myself is over here. It doesn't really work like that. It's all in one. And so if you can go to these drag spaces and you know for a fact no one there is going to be bothered by your sexuality, that to me is very healthy.
Yeah.
And it does lead to better mental health, less anxiety. Because I know we can't go through this life alone. You've got to have people in your life who love you.
Yeah.
For who you are.
For who you are.
And you can meet people like that in these spaces.
Yeah.
That's why I
sure.
think it's so important. I think if you take that away, I think that's going to have a really negative impact.
Yeah, for a lot of people, and me and myself included, the only time they get to maybe have some type of expression outside of going to a queer, like a dedicated queer space is Halloween. Like even me, the first time, actually the only time I've ever dressed up in drag was when I was, I want to say 13, 14 years old, when I dressed up as my best friend's boyfriend. And I wore my boyfriend at the time. I wore his clothes and stuff. And I put on my little mustache and everything. And that would be the first time only time I've dressed up in drag. But it was a very transformative time for me. It was a very empowering time for me. Yeah. And that's what people get out of these spaces. It's very empowering walking into a space like a drag performance where you know you can be yourself.
Yeah, empowering is definitely the word.
Yeah.
So if you take it away, that's really sad and depressing.
Yeah.
And it will make people depressed. We live in a world where those spaces are still sacred and unique and special. And in my dream world, everything would be so intertwined that like every space would be a queer, like a safe queer space. In my dream world, it's no matter where you go, you know it's going to be safe. Unfortunately, we don't live in that world.
Yeah, it's getting better. That actually makes me think of the Lesbian Bar Project. Do you know what that is?
I want to say I do.
I
but
feel like
it's-
I've mentioned it because we were talking about
Huh?
straight people being in queer spaces. It's a project because unfortunately right now the count of exclusively lesbian bars has dwindled down to, we're talking about like 15 to 20 bars in the entire
Mhm.
United States.
Yeah.
So it's very few. It's very few spaces for anyone who identifies as a woman to be able
Mhm.
to go in and share their love with other women as just us. It's very rare. Usually any type of queer spaces, again, misogyny is given to the gay men. If you go back 100 years ago, there were over 200 or 300 lesbian bars. Like it was a very, yeah, they were underground, they were secret. You had to know
Yeah.
someone to know where they were. But there were a lot more of them. And that's because the reason a lot of people think is because we did back then, we needed that community. We needed that space. Nowadays, we're able to go into typically straight bars dressed the way I'm dressed right now.
Mhm.
And it isn't as dangerous as it used to be. It's not as illegal as it used to be.
Yeah.
So they've dwindled. So there is that nice, beautiful thinking of it is becoming to where one day it will be completely mixed and you just go to in a bar, and it doesn't have to be a gay bar, it doesn't have to be a straight bar, it's just a bar and everyone's included and everyone
Yeah.
feels safe. And I mean, to me that is very beautiful too. I also have a dream
Mhm.
of one day where we like, to me the pansexuals have it right. We don't have preference
Yeah.
on your gender or the way you identify. We don't have, just like way back when there used to be, you used to only date people within your culture, right?
Yeah.
We don't have that anymore. And I'm the product of a very biracial marriage. Like my dad is a white guy, my mom's Mexican. Like nowadays that is celebrated. It's very
Mhm.
much accepted. It wasn't accepted 100 years ago. So I'm hoping in the next couple 100 years it'll be the same way with it comes to queer culture. It won't be something that is needing to be marginalized. Or yes, we will have pride for sure, but
Yeah.
it won't be as a it won't be as a fight.
I think we're working towards that, but still
Yeah.
have a long way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I agree. Drag is needed because it promotes visibility of the queer people in a wider audience. Again, thank you, RuPaul, for even creating a show to where we could watch drag culture. It's there.
Mhm.
I love it. It increases acceptance among our society, which is great. And just to reiterate what you said, drag promotes self-expression and creativity.
Mhm.
It gives a place for people to play and explore their gender identity, like I did that one Halloween.
Yeah.
It fosters community and inclusivity, building a safe space and promoting diversity, which diversity to me should always be something that we like strive for. It's getting crazy to me that we're becoming a culture that shows that thinks of diversity as like a bad word. Like,
Yeah.
that drives me insane. And then because of all this, it boosts mental health and well-being. So for many performers, drag is a source of empowerment and self-confidence. It provides an outlet for exploring and embracing one's identity in a supportive environment. And like you said, like that's really important to one's mental health. You can't hide that specific part of you and it be a healthy thing.
It can't. No, if you're hiding all that, it will lead to problems
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah.
It's really sad to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, it inspires fashion. Have you seen what they wear? I wish.
Yeah, they're very fashionable.
Oh, God.
There's a lot of fashion involved. Absolutely.
The way these men can just like parade and do splits in heels, I'm just shocked. You couldn't train me to wear heels like that. I have this quote from the HRC that I want to share with you guys. So, quote, drag is rooted in acceptance, resilience, and is an art form that represents the freedom of expression and resistance to unjust forces. Yeah, so I think drag is very important to our society, and we should stop making anti-drag legislation because that's crazy.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And in this episode, we'll have clips of the drag show that we went to.
Yeah,
So if
yeah.
anyone's never been to one, you can see what it's like. And it's nothing intimidating. It really is. You go, you have drinks, you have food.
Yeah.
You hear a performance, they dance around, you give them tips.
Yep.
It's just a ton of fun.
It's just a bunch of glitter and glamorous
Yeah,
fun. And
it
it's
is.
really, it's awesome. I loved it. Yeah, this next portion of our episode is just going to be like clips of our celebrating our anniversary together, the anniversary of this podcast. And with that being said, if drag is all you came for, a history of drag, then you can stop here. But if not,
Yeah.
I'm going to ask Lyndsey a couple questions on our podcast and things because I wanted to really celebrate that it's been a year, guys. We've been watching us for a year. It's been really nice. So, Lyndsey, I love this podcast. What's been your favorite episode so far?
Oh, my favorite episode so far? Gosh, that's a good one. I don't know. It's so hard to narrow it down because we have 35 episodes, I think, so far.
Yeah, it's an
Something
insane
like that.
amount.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I really enjoy having guests on.
Me too.
I really
Me
enjoy
too.
having. I like when it's you and I talking as well. I think those episodes are great. But we've had some really great guests. I think the one that comes to mind of what did I really enjoy or what did I learn the most from was when we had SJ on about the asexuality.
Oh, really? I did love SJ.
Yeah, I loved having them on. And I feel like I learned a lot, but I learned a lot from Brandy as well about like the episode about menopause. I don't know, but that one's more recent. So I'm like, is that recency bias that I like that one? And also Brandy's a friend of mine. Those are the like top two that come to mind of I really enjoyed having them on.
Yeah,
and learned so much.
My favorite episodes have been with guests as well. My
Yeah.
favorite topic for sure that we had a guest on was how to speak to your kids about sex.
Oh, Nadine was so good.
Nadine
Yeah, she
Thornhill,
was great.
Wow. Oh my goodness. This woman made me cry twice, guys. Like twice.
Yeah. That's when I would highly recommend to go back and watch.
I loved it. And I can't wait for the day that I get to have kids. I'm totally going to just be watching Nadine's content over and over again. Yeah, no, that topic was great. The topic that I learned the most about that kind of shocked me was the sexual surrogates that we recently did, where you gave me the topic of sexual surrogate, and what I thought I was getting into was very different than what I actually got into, right?
Yeah.
So that was also a really good topic for me as well. But yeah, did you think that we were gonna get this far when we first started?
No, I did. I had a feeling I feel like you and I are both pretty committed people. If we say we're going to do something, I feel like we will follow through. So I knew we would, but who knew what the year would look like?
Yeah.
We had more guests on than I thought we would have. But I've really been enjoying that because guests have so much insight, whether it's professional or personal. Sometimes the personal insight is just as great, if not greater, than the professional insight. When you hear people's stories.
Oh yeah.
Like I think about when Erin was on about the religious trauma, and she like doesn't work in the field that I do, but she has a lot of personal experience she can speak for a lot of people.
Yeah.
On what that's like.
It was crazy because Lyndsey hosted a beautiful party for our anniversary podcast at her house, which I'm very grateful for. But in that party, I learned that one of my friends who had never listened to our podcast before just happened to go onto our channel and got recommended Erin's episode.
Yeah.
And it really resonated with her.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So
I'm
it was,
glad.
yeah. It was insane to see like just having a guest on explain their experience, how that can affect people down the line.
Yeah, I've had some clients tell me, I had one email me that just said, I've listened to almost every episode. It's so good. And by the way, I don't directly promote this podcast to clients. I'm trying to keep the lines very clear of they're coming to me for a service. I don't want to push a show on them that I do. I never do that. I don't have it in my email. I don't tell clients about it. I just leave it for anyone to listen if they want to. And so when a client listens, it always shocks me a bit because I'm like, oh my gosh, how did they find out about our podcast? But yeah, I've had someone email and say they've listened to almost every episode. They really enjoyed it. And I've had other clients specifically because I have a lot of female clients, and I've had some that really Like the episode about menopause that we did with Brandy.
Good,
I've
yeah.
had really good feedback about that one. Oh my gosh, that was so great. I definitely resonate with a lot of what she said.
Yeah, me
And
too.
so getting feedback like that is really cool.
Yeah.
Because it's hard for me to wrap my head around, wait, people are actually listening. It still blows my mind. Yeah, because it's just us in this room recording, and I'm like, who knows who's listening? And then you get direct feedback. I'm like, wait, friends and family and clients are actually like paying attention.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's cool.
No, yeah. And even the stranger feedback, like I love it when it's a loved one for sure, because I take their recommendations, or I'm sorry, their feedback really close to heart, because
Yeah.
they know me, and I'm just like, oh my god, you saw me on camera. But no, I even love the comments we've gotten. Our episode with Sorka
Yeah.
Butterly, that episode where it was lesbian versus bisexual versus straight, and we were just talking about relationships and how it's different. I loved that episode. It was so much fun.
Yeah.
And it was literally just us talking about our experience. No
Mhm.
research, no timeline, no Wikipedia articles needed. It was just us girls on a couch talking.
I know. Yeah. And it was a really great episode.
Yeah. No, I love it. This has been great. So for our future of this podcast, what would be, who would be like some of your dream guests if we could have someone on here?
Oh, my dream guest. It would be, okay, my dream guest, like top dream guest.
Okay, yeah.
Would be Dr. Emily Nagoski. She wrote the book Come As You Are. It's like this big book on sexuality, and she's a sexuality researcher, and I think has another book that just came out. But her book is one that I recommend to a lot of clients because it can normalizes wherever you are. She very much has this perspective of nothing is really a problem unless if you have a medical issue. There's some things that obviously you want to go get checked up. For example, if your libido is low, she really has this good perspective of don't view it as something is wrong with you. It just is, right? This is where you are right now. And she has a lot of research, or her book includes a lot of research and data on like why that might be and how to change the context that you're in if that's what you want to do. It's really great. So yeah, if I had to pick a dream guest, that would be her.
Hey, that's
Yeah.
awesome. Okay. Yeah. And do you have a couple topics that you really want to tackle after the 35 topics that we've tackled so far?
I still want to tackle sex and autism,
Oh.
the crossover of that. And then also there's a lot of like psychedelic assisted or like therapy that includes psychedelics.
Oh, yeah.
And how that can impact not just like your mental health, but also does that help with your sex life? There's a lot of intersection there as well.
Okay.
That I think those two come to mind just off the top of my head of what would be cool to cover.
Oh, yeah. I would also love to go into like sex and disabilities. I know that was something that was requested that we will get to, I promise.
Yeah.
And then the other one, I definitely, especially with the whole Olympics thing that came up, I definitely want to go into gender and sex and the differences and how that goes. Yeah. I'm excited. It's been a great year.
Yeah, it's been a really great year. There's many more topics that we can cover.
Oh, yeah. So with that, guys, speak to the audience. If any of you out there have a topic that you would like us to cover, research, or shed light on a little bit more, please reach out to us. That would be great to get a little feedback from what you guys want to listen to. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. I think last thing I'll mention before we wrap up is just like personal update, and it does impact like how many episodes we'll have coming out soon.
Yeah.
But for our audience, like I am pregnant, and so I'll be having a baby in December.
Woo!
Which is very exciting. So I'm like 6 months right now. So it's very exciting. But it's also part of like why we took a break. We celebrated our year. There was also like travel involved. Like you were
on a cruise.
Yeah, you were out of town. But then there's also been some weekends where I just haven't felt very good because of the pregnancy. And so anyways, we've taken a little bit of a break, which I think has been nice for us just to like recoup. But we plan to still like moving forward. We plan to still do our bi-weekly setup, and then but if we have any break at the beginning of next year, it'll most likely be due to me having a baby. So we'll keep y'all updated if there's any change in our schedule. But no, we plan to keep going and producing episodes and putting out content and having guests. And
even if she's on just 2 hours of sleep, guys, we'll see. We'll do our best.
We'll do our best. We'll make it happen. But yeah, I'm excited to keep going.
Yeah, no, it's been great. And I like to see. So I honestly enjoyed this break. It was unexpected. It wasn't actually planned. We weren't supposed to be
it just
taking a
happened.
break.
Yeah.
But it was good, and I feel like that gave It was like on TV. You get a break and then you get a new season. So
Yeah.
I want to say that this would be the start of our second season.
This is the start of season 2. I would say this is our season 2 kickoff.
Hey, badass. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's been great, guys. So keep leaving us feedback, keep commenting, keep subscribing. Like I'm very proud and happy to give this content.
Same.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add?
That's it.
Okay, guys. Yeah, let us know what you thought about this and what you want to hear in the future. We are open for listener support. And so if you want to financially support us, even as low as $1 a month, any help we get, even if all you can do is subscribe and follow, that support helps us as well, just to continue creating content that you all deserve and to come up with interesting topics. And we're excited to keep going.
Hey.
So again, we are Sex Positivity Unfiltered, and remember to stay curious and fuck politeness.
Wifey and I are at the neighborhood. I'm about to enjoy Hamburger Mary's.